call in order the work session, City Council work session for August 8th, 2022. I'll call the roll. Boyer.
Here.
Councilmember Shanigans.
Here.
Councilmember Ringstocker is here. President Ringstocker. Councilmember Barton.
Here.
Councilmember Robertson.
Here.
Member Center. Not here. Item number 3. Comprehensive plan kickoff. Do I need to start over? Everybody's here but Carolyn. Item number 3, comprehensive plan kickoff. Mr. Tim Bercier.
Good evening, everybody. Yeah, today's exactly what we're doing. It's comprehensive plan kickoff. So this is the first time, I guess, we're announcing to the public and you that we're in this process. We're at the beginning of the process in-house. We're building off of some old comprehensive plans. We have Diane Clare on board with us, and she has worked on the last 2 comprehensive plans, so she's helping kind of lead the charge on that in-house. So we're building off of past comprehensive plans, but also her knowledge and things she's done in the past. So what we wanted to do today was we want to talk to everyone about the process and what the comprehensive plan is and what's required, with the intention of making sure that we didn't lose all of you in the process, because this will take some time to write. It'll go in front of the Planning Commission a lot of times. We're going to ask for public input. We'll have public forums. But I've been involved in situations before where the comprehensive plan would come to all of you for adoption, and it's sort of like, hey, how did this get to me? Like, what happened? Why is it here? I didn't know anything about this. So this is an opportunity just to discuss with all of you kind of our process and how we go through things, but also to hear from you on the best ways to keep all of you involved in the process. So we're getting input from you throughout, and then in the end, when you get everything, it's kind of no surprise what's going on. So I'll talk a little bit about what our ideas are about that, and we're open to listening to obviously any input from all of you about the process. So what's a comprehensive plan? The Maryland Department of Planning, state planning website says it's a policy document that promotes growth, that fosters vibrant, livable communities, preserves and protects the environment, and makes efficient use of state resources. So there's a land use article, there's law in Maryland that says that any municipality that has a planning commission has to have a comprehensive plan. They're updated every 10 years, and that kind of goes along with the census. So once we get census information and we see how much we've grown or not grown and see how things have changed in the community, then we can update our plan based on those statistics and then the rest of the information I'll talk about herein. So this is from this year's census. This is just a picture of our community and a snapshot of what's going on here with the population and demographics and all that stuff. All this will be included in the plan. Not so important for this meeting. And all these slides will be available on the website. I'll make sure this presentation gets put up for later purposes. So the land use law from Maryland requires that we have all of these elements. In our current plan, we have all these elements now, but we'll build off of them. For instance, we have a housing element now in our plan, but in 2019, the state of Maryland passed a new law requiring us to address housing in a specific way. So we'll build off of that. The municipal growth element is a smart growth element that was part of some, I think, 2008 or 2009 legislation originally. And that, with the water resources element, requires us to look at our resources, our utilities, what we have available, and only grow within our means. So that's what all these things look at. Some of these things have been, like I said, addressed in the past. Obviously, in the past, 10, 12 years since we were doing the last plan, we've annexed and grown in a certain way. So we'll look at that now and see how things have changed. We've obviously, had some other developments and stuff in the community and annexation. So all that will be put into context, and then we'll relook at some of those issues. So this is just sort of the look that we're going with. There's a graphic designer that's been hired as part of this process, and this is sort of what the look will be. There will be a printed form available, but we're moving towards mostly everything being electronic, and I'll talk to you about some of those technologies we're going to use for that here in a minute. But mostly this will be available on the internet, online, in an electronic form, not the old books from before. And our last comprehensive plan was a lot of type, a lot of text. This will definitely be more graphic pictures, more interesting shots, and tell a better story about what Havre de Grace is really all about. So you have to think about some things when you start the planning process. So this is from our Facebook page. It says that we're a city on the Chesapeake that returns you to the best of America, a small, charming town, beautiful vistas, kind and caring people. And then when asked about 3 words that you think about when you think about Havre de Grace, you have obviously the larger words there are the ones that were the larger responses. So quaint, that there's water here, there's history, historic, people are friendly, it's fun, charming, beautiful. So all those things that all of us know, but it's always good to see what other people think of kind of in a snapshot. So this is part of what we do in our visioning process. This is one of the many things we do to try to get input from the public to see what is important to them. Obviously, we're home of the Warriors. This is something from the mayor on the left side, and on the right, it talks about how do we build on what we founded here in the city. So honoring veterans and first responders, promoting literacy, education, and cultural arts, remaining good stewards of the environment, celebrating our shared sense of volunteerism, and embracing diversity that unites our community. So we got to look at how we build on our heritage. So we'll ask these questions. What do you see for the city of Havre de Grace? What do you want it to be now, and where do you want it to go in the future? So these comprehensive plans look 20 years out is the horizon. So they have to be done every 10 years, but we're looking 20 years into the future of what we want the city to look at. So this is from the 2004 comprehensive plan. The past visions in that plan was a good family life in the community, small town ambiance, environmentally sensitive community, historic and cultural center, and a good place to do business. And that was then furthered in some of the other comprehensive plans that we had from 96 and 2010. So ideas for new vision is to have a healthy community, walking community, utilizing some of these new bike trails and things that we're putting in, walking trails that we've required in new subdivisions, being inclusive, being vibrant and connected, paying more attention or emphasizing our cultural historic hub. You hear a lot about smart growth and those sorts of things. So continuing to implement those measures, being sustainable and being fiscally sound. And we have some issues we have to address, obviously. We have continuing environmental regulations that need to be addressed, sea level rise, climate change. We have critical area law that we've just redone recently, as all of you know. So implementing our critical law, our floodplain plan, all those sorts of things, aging infrastructure, bridges, highways, and making sure that there's housing available for all different aspects of our communities. So we have this great waterfront, and it's one of the top 2 things I think you saw on that list of 3 words that people had. And it's cool, but it also makes it complicated. We have critical law, we have environmental issues, sea level rise, lots of things we have to address. We're an older community, which means we have older infrastructure. We've spoke a lot recently about inflow and infiltration issues and terracotta pipes and some of these old things that exist that need to be replaced. And there's a lot of plans already in place to fix some of those things. So these are some of our sustainability initiatives that we're championing, and that all of you know. That we have electronic vehicle stations, a green team, that we're on top of a lot of these issues already. So electrical vehicles, the last picture was some of the solar panels. These are community gardens that we have. And we have historic and cultural resources. So we have 3 different historic trails where we have a big area for such a small city for being in the National Register of Historic Districts. Our Main Street designation, new museums that are coming to town, the old museums that have already been here, lots of cultural attractions. These are some of those. This is obviously the old map of the city. So we are, whether we've tried to be or not, or before the state passed smart growth legislation, I mean, Havre de Grace is kind of a smart growth place. We have a downtown, a center. This is where we emphasized a lot of our density. We've implemented water treatment and wastewater treatment options to help clean up the Chesapeake Bay. We have the Living Shoreline project, as all of you know, and we continue to have these public investments. So when you look at comprehensive plans, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, but as you go through the approval process, it's not just us you look at. We also have to discuss with Aberdeen where they're going to grow. We have to discuss with the county what our growth plans are and what their thoughts are. So we coordinate with all those different entities. They'll get the plan and they have some time to review it and get us back comments, but we work on all of our regional relationships. And it's not just with the municipalities. As you see on here, there's also some other organizations, including when we met with Amtrak just recently and making sure that we're coordinating their redevelopment effort in our plan as well. This is just more about how we've been a sustainable community, how we have bike trails, and how we've put a lot of things in place and how we continue to move that forward. So in our current comprehensive plan, those dark red areas are where we had planned to grow. And again, these are revisited now. This is what this looked like 10 years ago. And these things may have changed. Those green areas are protected areas. So if we are to grow in the future, we have to discuss where we're going to grow and how or do we focus more on infill development and revitalization in the old center area and what that looks like. So these are all options and things that we discuss in the plan and why we need this vision and input from the community and from all of you in the Planning Commission. So these are some items that we're all kind of looking at now that we're dealing with, that all of you know from certain developments in the community and annexations and all that sort of stuff, and where we want to grow, and obviously redevelopment of the hospital site and plans for the hospital, proposed former hospital property on 155. Then we have some new issues to address that have come in over the years. So we have, coming over time. So we have everything that happened with economic development after COVID-19, with the gig economy, with offices not being utilized as much. We don't know for sure if there'll be a swing back to that or not. And then all the internal issues that we've spoke about of trying to attract hotels and hotel space and bed and breakfasts versus short-term rentals and those whole things. So another group of things to look at. So again, the plan is a policy document, so it's not law. It does need to be implemented, but the plan is for it to be implemented. It doesn't make a lot of sense to go through all this work and have everyone involved and then not do the implementation process and pass ordinances and regulation of those things. So that's why we need buy-in from everybody. We need direction from this group about what we want Havre de Grace to be. So general timeline, we're going to do our public input process, starting with story maps, which I'm going to show you a couple examples of here in a minute. We have some of the very beginning chapters already drafted, just kind of the boilerplate information of what a comprehensive plan is, what the state requires. We will take those elements, give them to the Planning Commission a month in advance, hold a Planning Commission meeting, and then discuss whatever changes that they'll have. Our plan is to have the Planning Committee along with the Planning Commission. And then we have some people in our community, like Volney Ford, for instance, who's the Planning Commission chair now. He won't be Planning Commission chair next year, but we're hoping to keep him involved in the process since he's been through it, and have some other people in the community. We're not sure quite yet if that'll be a steering committee or an advisory committee and how that'll work. And that doesn't necessarily need to be part of the approval process, but we're looking to get as much input as possible from the community and get that information into the document and then get it into different groups that some different diversity and those sorts of things, get more input from them, and then get that to the Planning Commission and keep this group in the loop the entire time. So that's sort of the entire communication loop process with that. So there's required state reviews, and then City Council eventually adopts that. So this, you can't read, and that's okay. This is just to show you really on the top are the months, and then each of those blocks represent a milestone in the process of kind of what we're doing. So at the top there, we have our beginning process. In the middle, the blue and yellow are when we submit the different parts to the Planning Commission, and then when we hold the meetings for those. And then the end is sort of the revision and adoption process. So state agencies and adjoining local jurisdictions have 60 days to review. They get us back comments, and then we address those comments. Some of those are advisory. The state comments are a little bit more serious. there's certain things they can, from what I understand, and maybe this has changed, but there was certain funding or certain things that they could withhold if your comprehensive plan didn't address an element in a certain way, or you didn't meet some of the requirements. My experience in the past has been, I haven't received any comments from them that said, this doesn't meet the guidelines, this needs to be changed. Usually they're pretty flexible and understanding, and also very helpful in helping you address your issues, and also meeting what the state requirements are. The Planning Commission will have to hold at least one public hearing on the document. It'll recommend adoption of the plan to City Council. Then City Council will have its own public hearing, and then it can either adopt the plan, modify, remand, or disprove the plan. The hope is, with having this kickoff meeting and discussing how to go forward, would be that you would adopt it right away, that there wouldn't be anything that you were unsure about in the plan, that everybody would be involved, and that there may be some modifications, but things that could be done, that it could be approved with modifications. We can make some changes and have that adopted. So that would be our goal. That's our goal for having this kickoff meeting. It's cool for setting up this process and trying to find a way to keep everyone involved. So we have a lot of mapping that's part of this. That's one of the best parts of the document is seeing all the different maps and all the different data included in a way that's visually understandable, graphically understandable. We have Mari Thaxton helping us with that. Graphic design setup is provided by Ann Fulham. And again, it'll mostly be online with not just narrative. There'll be full photos, and I'll show you this story map situation here in a second. So with that so far, are there any questions? Mm-hmm.
So with the plans that we have for the revitalization of downtown, how does that fit in what you're trying to do in basically probably the time frame that will precede the finished product of the downtown renovation?
Mm-hmm. So there's two ways to address that. So part of the plan, and I don't know if it said it was part of the required plan up there, but generally you take all plans and studies that would have to do with anything, and you would recognize those in the plan. So you kind of have like a bibliography at the end where you have all those things, but they shouldn't just be listed in there. I mean, they should be things that we're reading. At this point in the process, like you said, this is a project that'll already be implemented. So we'll show in our revitalization sections parts from that plan that show what the final product would be. In the future, what would happen, hopefully, is that there'll be items maybe that are addressed in the comprehensive plan that aren't addressed in the downtown revitalization plan. That will be something that needs to be implemented that will require a downtown a revitalization plan or ordinance or a regulation or something like that. So we would take the information that came from that, from the downtown revitalization plan, and we would include that in the document to show what will be there. And luckily, we have a lot of people on staff in the planning department, not me, obviously, but Diane's been here for a long time. Marissa Willis has been here for a while. So there's a lot of longevity of people here that know what's been going on, what's planned, and we should have a pretty comprehensive group of items that we recognize in the plan as part of it. Mm-hmm. Sure.
Follow up on that. How about the Route 40 corridor? Is that going to be incorporated?
Yeah.
Any improvements to the Route 40 corridor?
Yeah. So that's something that will definitely be addressed. It's something that we've talked about in-house, and that'll be part of the public input process as a separate item. As you know, the landscape ordinance was passed. I think a lot of that had to do with the look on Route 40. We'll look at some other items. Route 40 is a state highway, so there'll be coordination with that group as well to see what State Highway Administration is going to do. But Route 40 will definitely be part of it. And what's great is that this is just the kickoff meeting. So there'll be other meetings down the road. One or two of the meetings in that timeline I showed was a joint council and planning commission meeting, and that doesn't have to be a public hearing. That could be a workshop. It can be a retreat to get all of you in the room with all the planning commission members, the planning staff, and speak about these specific topics. So if we do one, I think one scheduled for tentatively for January. So with all of you, we can get those main topics you want to hear about, and we can address those online. We can then have public forums and address those issues. So we have a couple different ways to do that. But eventually, when we get to that main visioning process, we'll have all of you involved with the Planning Commission, so we're all on the same page of those main things that you want us to get input from the community about or address in the plan.
Okay, thank you.
Is there, I mean, I guess the opportunity exists already, but it might be a good idea to have the Economic Development Advisory Board focus in on at least some aspects. You know, I would think that they would be the ones informing the Planning Commission of possible zoning requirements. Well, you guys would have to figure out what would be required, you know, for whatever plan they would see. I think their input's probably important.
Okay. No, that's good feedback. We have spoke with, we've had sit-down meetings with Public Works when Tim Whitty was still director. We were getting information from him about our water and wastewater capacity situation for the water resources element. We've spoken to Bridget as well about economic development issues. So we've begun those in-house discussions, but we'll definitely make sure that we work into the process that the boards are involved early and often.
Can you go back to the timeline when everything, I didn't get to write, not that one, the one before that?
Yeah, so final adoption, our plan is to have this adopted October 2023. So if you back 60 days, if you give us 30 days for edits, that'd be September, and then 60 days back from there would be July 2023. We would have it submitted to Planning Commission. So basically between now and July 2023, we'll write all those elements, have them periodically reviewed, have several Planning Commission meetings, have both joint meetings with this group and the Planning Commission. So that'll all happen basically in the next 12 months.
So one of the things that I don't honestly feel that we do very well, or that, I rephrase that, and it's not that we do it. I think something that we need to take extra step and make sure that we do even better is reaching out to all communities within Havre Grace. And there's multiple layers to communities and multiple ways of looking at them. What ways, other than having a meeting where we call everybody to come in, what additional ways can we creatively reach out to people and effectively get their input?
I'll show you the story maps items that we have in a second. So that's all available online, and they're basically mini web pages, and they're really there to help inspire people about different topics, and then it provides a survey at the end. So that, along with advertising on Facebook, Instagram, all that kind of specialized like advertising and targeting, we're really able to reach different communities that way. Public forums can be very targeted. It doesn't have to be, hey, we're going to be here, whoever can show up. I was working, this was some time ago, but I was working in Berlin, Maryland, and there's an African-American community that was on the other side of downtown on 131, and there were a couple of council people from that area that felt that their community wasn't brought into these issues very often. So we worked with them and community leaders in those neighborhoods and had special forums over there. So those are all things that we can do to make sure that we are as inclusive as we possibly can be. In the past, yeah, I mean, it was just kind of public forums in a central place, but just with technology and everything, we have so many more options to reach so many different groups of people. So we plan on utilizing all those, and I'll show you some examples of how we plan to do that.
Okay, thank you.
No, yeah, the opportunity definitely exists for, I think tool design really gave us a good example of like the charrettes and all, so maybe that's one avenue for public input. I just want to say thank you to the council president and to the administration for, you know, making this forum happen and including us in this process, so thank you guys.
Mr. Borsier, if I may. So we had a comprehensive plan in '96. We had another one in '04, in 2010, and now we're 13 years out. I see, like, so the difference is 10 years, then 6 years, then 10 years, and now we're at 13 years. Why? Can you explain why?
Yeah, so the original law required updates every 6 years. and then that's recently changed. So that's part of it. The time between when it was last adopted and now, why it's been 13 years, I'm not exactly sure. I know there's a project that was important to the city. We've had critical area law updates that have come into place and some other things.
I'm sure the universal excuse of COVID.
Yeah,
factored
that
in
might
there,
not, that might have hurt. I mean, honestly, when we talk about kind of public input and forums and all those things, I mean, that would be obviously very difficult during COVID. I mean, there was Zoom and those sorts of things, but a lot of that stuff is kind of poorly attended, and it really took a while in COVID to get good ways to get input from people. And that was a lot of software that was out there, and I was part of some SWOT analysis stuff with some different groups in a year or so ago, and they were paying some software company in France that was that made software to be able to kind of do that and have Post-its and all that other stuff, and it was still a little wonky, like it still wasn't all together. So that probably had something to do with it. But some of these things that they take time, and if you're sort of still following if the old plan still is relevant, there's nothing wrong with missing that deadline by a little bit. I think it's better to have it right than to just do it. So yeah, now's the right time to move forward. Mm-hmm.
I find it interesting in reviewing the old plans to see what was expected to happen versus what actually did happen. Like Bully Rock Parkway was supposed to come out where Lapidum is. A few other things that have happened around town, but for the most part, we've stuck with the plan. So I thank you for your input. Do you have anything further? Or?
Yeah, let me just show you these. I'll show you these story maps really quick. I think they're interesting anyway. I'm going to turn my back to you for a second so I can see what I'm doing. So, as I was saying, these are basically mini websites, and you can have them on whatever, but we have them on a, you can use them for anything. Obviously, as part of the comprehensive plan process, we're using them for each of the different categories. And the idea is sort of to inspire you, or give you knowledge, let you know kind of what's going on in these different items, and then at the end provide some sort of survey or way for you to get information. So, for instance, this one's on history and cultural tourism. So here are some old depictions of the city. And as you kind of scroll down, you can see here there's 5 different links that take you to the different parts of this story map. So we talk about the historic trails, and you have some live links in here, so you can click on something and it'll take you to the John Smith Chesapeake Trail. So you keep going down, again, more stuff, tell you about the early development of the town and the history. This is the original plat, a little bit of a timeline. And then you get to some interesting stuff you can do. So on the left here, you have the original plat idea of the town, and on the right, you have obviously the aerial, the 2021 aerial would exist now, and you can actually just take this map and drag it across. So you can see we're built much in the way that we were founded. So it's this kind of interesting stuff. I think that gets people, that's not just sitting in a public forum and having topics and trying to drag out 2 or 3 hours and keep people interested and involved. You can kind of do it at your own time. Digest the information in your own way, and at your leisure, and kind of get out whatever you're going to get out of it. So again, just a bunch of information, different ideas, context, all that stuff, and then at the end here you have a survey. So then you can put in information about these different questions, and we can make whatever questions that we want here. We can make it multiple choice. We decided in this example just to do open questions, so then we can take that information, read whatever people put in, and get the most out of it instead of sort of containing them into a couple different multiple choice questions. So yeah, this is one, and then a similar one we did is on the water resources element. So again, this is a state mandated requirement, originally from 2008. So this will be the second time we address this, related to water, sewer, storm water management, flooding, and sea level rise. So it's a lot of different pictures of our infrastructure, the different things that we're doing, and then there's links to like the floodplain management plan that we have, and all the information we have for this that Marissa Willis deals with in our department. So there's links to a lot of different information. So you can get a overview We give the ability to kind of dig deeper into these issues and make you think about it more, and then again, provide you with an opportunity to give us input on the topic. So we'll have a number of these, probably 10 to 15 different ones of these that we'll roll out and continue to advertise and try to get the public involved. And some will look at all 15, some may just be interested in the environment, some may be interested in housing, that sort of thing. And we're just gonna take whatever we can get. And then once we get that information, we can see, okay, we fell short here. Maybe this is something we need to address in a public forum or in a different manner. We have a lot of information here that's good. Now we can write an element, share that with Planning Commission, get their review, and kind of continue on that communication loop I discussed earlier. So this is a lot of the stuff we've been working on. These are the two that are pretty clean and finished that I can kind of show you quickly on the TV, but there's probably 10 or so that are pretty close to being done, and in September we'll roll all of them out.
Thank you so much. Council, do you have any other questions?
I just want to say thank you to you and the planning department for taking time to develop the story maps. It's very much appreciated, especially being in a more visual, time period in our lives. A lot of people have internet and can get out, can't get out as often, but see more of Havre de Grace.
Great.
So it's very for 21st century, and thank you very much for bringing that forward.
You're welcome.
Mr. Bercier, I truly appreciate this update. It really brings, the idea of what we have ahead of us, out for us to understand, and we can put in our calendars. And I see the monthly meetings coming up for the Planning Commission, and how you've tracked everything and what you expect to happen when, and it's greatly appreciated. Thank you. Just let us know whatever you need from us. Great.
Sounds great. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim. Excellent job. Thank you very much.
All right, next up, number 4, legislative initiatives with Mr. Adam Rutinsky.
All right, Mr. Mayor, Mr. President, members of the council. The administration has before you 2 pieces of legislation for consideration. I'm going to start with the ordinance. The ordinance would codify in the city code under Chapter 1, General Provisions, a methodology for government relations, if you will. And I can take it item by item if you would like.
However you'd like to do it, sir.
Okay, so the first section would authorize the establishment of priorities, which would basically be the bills we are seeking to have introduced into the General Assembly or other lawmaking bodies. Let me reverse that. I'm sorry, this section 2, first one would be us to establish priorities. Part 2 would be for us to have them introduced. Section 3 would be granting the mayor or designees the authorization to take positions on legislation. Then we go into 1.5, which is the coordination of testimony. It just allows the mayor's office, city staff, and stakeholders to coordinate testimony between the city and lawmaking bodies. Takes us to item 1.6, pretty much the same principle, but for communications. Then item 1.7 would allow the mayor or designee to work with lawmakers or rule makers to work on amendments to introduce legislation. And then 1.8 would define a process, which basically outlines prior to the General Assembly meeting, the mayor will establish a resolution which outlines possible positions for the council to take, the mayor and city council to take, identify some tasks for the legislative liaison to provide updates to certain members of the administration and the council. Also prescribes that after the mayor takes a position, how it communicates the position taken and the testimony provided to the city council, and also tasks the city liaison or another designee with the responsibility of attending delegation meetings and meetings of public hearings. And that's pretty much just the ordinance in front of you will allow anything designated to the mayor to allow the mayor to designate it to the director, the authority to the director of administration, city attorney, or legislative liaison. Is there any questions?
Council, any questions? Mr. Martin?
That's Councilmember Martin to you, sir.
Honorable Councilmember Martin.
Adam, on 1-9, I think we need to look at the wording to change legislation to legislative. So the city attorney and the legislative liaison
Okay.
was the first one.
Noted.
When we go to 1-8, we look at B and C. Look at item 3. It says the council member who serves as the liaison to the Maryland Municipal League. And it needs to be, at least I feel, it needs to be, reflect the fact that a liaison is either elected, as in the district vice president for the chapter is elected, and therefore they are a liaison to the Maryland Municipal League, or they're appointed. If you're appointed to the legislative committee, you are therefore a liaison. Other than that, we're not really liaisons to in either one of these aspects. So I think it says if appointed, it should say if appointed or elected as far as the end of the council member who serves as liaison.
Okay.
Because that is a determination made by the Maryland Municipal League whether they are elected or appointed in as a liaison.
Okay, noted, thank you.
Council, any other further input?
Yeah, still one more.
Okay, sir.
The statement in general, I would like to see added to the end of this ordinance is a simple statement that says, this does not preclude the following from submitting their personal views in written or oral testimony. The mayor, the council president, the council member who serves as liaison, the director of administration, the city attorney. So it really just letting everybody know that in this legislation and in this ordinance that it actually does protect the First Amendment rights of being able to testify on your personal beliefs down in the legislature. An example this year was Delegate Lasante put in that piece of legislation for the ease in forming a municipality. The city chose not to take a position on that. However, I did submit both written and oral presentations to that as identifying myself as a city council member, but not representing, these were my personal opinions, not representing the city of Havre de Grace. So I'd just like to see that, and I have it written out. So I mean, if you want to.
I would think that, if I may, your last statement there about making sure that if you announce yourself as an elected official, you need to clarify that you're not representing there in form as the council person, and you're not representing the body as a whole.
And that's why I said it said personal views.
If I may.
Sure.
So I don't believe this legislation precludes you from doing that. I think that's your personal right and your right as a city council member to take a position on any piece of legislation. What this is really focusing on is the corporate entity, the mayor and city council of Havre de Grace, Inc. So that's what this legislation is about. It's not anywhere in there trying to preclude or strip any right that you already have as far as a council member or representative.
Mr. President, this also wouldn't preclude the mayor from taking a separate position that's different than the council's position. This is just for the corporate entity.
Understood. Council, any other further comments or questions?
Sure.
Sure, please. You still have the floor.
In 1-8, Section D, 105 through 107, it says, after the mayor submits written or oral testimony, a copy of the written testimony or summary of the oral testimony submitted will be made available to the mayor and city council. Since the mayor's the one doing it, I don't know that the mayor has to be included in that line. It should be just submitted to the city council and delete the word mayor and.
If I can, the mayor and city council there is the legislative body, mayor and city council. So maybe we could put mayor and city council of Havre to clarify, but it's intended to be made available to the entire body, and that would make it a public record as well.
I think where we have to make sure that we're not misinterpreting is we're focused on the corporate entity of the city of Havre de Grace, the mayor and city council of Havre de Grace, not the individual mayor and the city council individually. This is the corporate body that this is.
But again,
speaking
this
to.
one doesn't say the city council of Havre de Grace, it just says the mayor and city council. So at that point, that's why I wasn't reading it as a corporate entity, but as individual positions.
And that's on D, Councilman.
That is on D, and just a clarification, either on 107, whether it's delete mayor or add Havre de Grace, the city council of Havre de Grace, to make it a legal entity as you were deferring.
All right, thank you, sir.
Mr. Martin? Sir? Mr. Robertson? Sorry, Councilmember Robertson.
To me, this is simply codifying kind of the process that has loosely been happening. I think, the mayor and the administration has been kind of advocating for particular legislation in Annapolis for a couple of years now. I think it's important that, we define what that authority is, especially for future administrations and future councils. My only concern with how this reads is that it gives the mayor the authority to speak on the city's behalf, the corporate entity, with a very loose definition of what the council has defined as legislative priorities. So I would probably go under Section 8 and add a line in the process that explains that the mayor would be speaking on things that shall be passed by the council, not may. And then under 1-3, perhaps the positions and authorizations would be that the mayor speaks to things that are approved by the governing body of the city, if he's speaking on behalf of the city. That would be my recommendation.
May I? It's the intention, if the mayor's office submits testimony under the mayor and city council, under that label, it'll be testimony, or be a position which was prior approved by the city council, the mayor and city council.
I understand what the intention is and may be for now, but I also understand how intentions can be misconveyed over time. So, again, a future mayor and city council, 10, 15, 20 years from now, I would hate for them to be in the position where the bodies are not conjoined and speaking in one voice.
I find that to be very valid. We work exceptionally well together here as this body, and I know in the past it hasn't always been that way, and I understand exactly what your intent is on that, and I support it as well. Council, any other further comments on this piece?
Good job.
I'm sorry, sir. Oh, another one. Yeah.
And the only other question is the definition of legislative liaison.
I've begun drafting that definition for you, and I'll make sure we have it.
Thank you.
Redraft it into the ordinance by Wednesday.
You over there writing your new job title? No, I will say, Adam, I've watched you grow just in my 5 years on council, man, and you've gone from the minister of propaganda that I used to like to call you to really a pretty sharp and well-attuned mind when it comes to things going on in the General Assembly in Annapolis. So
Thank you.
appreciate your time and effort on that, man.
Thank you. We'll have this redrafted back out for the 15th.
Just one other comment, and I think Adam and the mayor and the director of administration would kind of agree. We have to get our members of the city council more involved so that they can be on and liaisons, whether it be on the legislative committee, whether it be a District 10 vice president, somewhere where we have a say, because one of the things that if you look at the makeup of MML, it's more heavily weighted towards counties like Prince George's, Montgomery, Harford and Cecil County. We represent 8 municipalities in Cecil County and 3 in Harford County as a District 10. And that's a concern, because if we lose our voice down in Annapolis and being involved in some of these committees, whether it be on the Education Committee, the Legislative Committee, or even the Conference Committee, I make a plea that we consider, the members of this group consider volunteering and becoming more involved with that so that we actually stay as active liaisons with the Maryland Municipal League.
Understood, thank you. Mr. Rachimsky, the next piece of legislation, sir.
All right, the second piece of legislation before you for consideration is a resolution establishing the priorities for the upcoming session of the Maryland General Assembly. So the ordinance established the process. The ordinance speaks to a resolution establishing these priorities. These are the priorities the mayor is recommending. And I'll just take them section by section. Section 1 would be proposed legislation. So this would be legislation that we would seek to have introduced in the next session of the Maryland General Assembly. The first one, A, would be legislation establishing an alcoholic beverage license type for performing arts centers in Harford County. Item B would be legislation establishing an additional license privilege for a holder of or an applicant for a Class B license to sell and serve alcohol beverages in an area on the sidewalk directly in front of a licensed establishment. So this is in direct response to the downtown revitalization plan. And if we expand our sidewalks, there is some discussion about having cafe seating. If you want to serve liquor on those sidewalks, you're going to need to have permission from Annapolis. So this is just kind of planning in advance for that. D was redlined, but just give you a background on D. Right now, the Express Powers Act under the Annotated Code of Maryland allows a municipality to enforce a nuisance ordinance up to 1/2 mile outside of its city boundaries. The city is kind of looking at this a little bit more in the area of property maintenance and may revisit some areas to kind of accommodate that. But it doesn't seem like it's something we need to pursue externally at this point. And E is legislation that would establish a process for reviewing and evaluating applications for wetlands. And,
Adam.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Adam. I have a question on the legislation that would enable the municipalities. We brought that up to the county council, so was there any movement on that in terms of some of the poorly maintained, and is that why this is crossed out, or you're just thinking about going in a different direction?
The city attorney can answer that more correctly.
So I wasn't involved in any discussions with the county, but I went back and looked at the local government article at the state level. It's already the law that we can do this if we have authorized ourselves to do it. So we need to amend our current ordinance, code, to allow us to do that. And it relates to disorderly conduct and nuisances. So we've been in the process of looking at our nuisance code, so that will get updated to apply out up to 1/2 mile outside. And I think if we incorporate certain property maintenance issues as nuisances, that would cover the nuisance aspect. So that's what we're looking at. I think we could do that internally without having to raise it to the state level. So once we get to the point where we have something drafted, we'll probably be able to present it to the county and say, this is what we're planning on doing. And it might also be something that other municipalities want to try and do also, so.
Thank you.
Going back to E, this would pretty much establish a process for projects like the Living Shoreline. As of right now in the state of Maryland, projects like this are kind of looked at as development, where they're really not development, they're ecological restoration. A bill was introduced last year, which would have kind of established a framework and some regulation. The bill was sent to study for a couple of years. So this is something we're going to look at and see. We'll see where it is. Is there any questions on these proposals? Councilman.
Hey, so I think B makes all the sense in the world, and I'm 100% behind it. However, you know, I also recognize that it could become a little difficult from an enforcement aspect, you know, with the Harford County Liquor Board. And I'm just wondering, I know that some time ago we had talked about lobbying Annapolis for establishing our own liquor authority in this city. Has that just been completely sidelined?
It has.
Is
We
there?
haven't pursued that any further.
Okay. Would there be merit to pursuing that again? Because I'm thinking of, you know, First Fridays, and I'm thinking of the cafe seating, and handling that stuff at the local level may or may not be, you know, better for our restaurants and our citizens. I don't know.
When we had the discussion last time, there was pros and cons of doing it. One of the things that, one of the things was we needed just to develop a better relationship with the current liquor board. The other part of it was if by design we created our own liquor board, then we would have local residents that would be having to enforce the regulations against local residents, and we saw there could be some issue with that.
I guess, is the problem that there would be like a retribution aspect? Is that the thought?
That was some of the thought on both sides.
Do we know where the Harford County Liquor Board members reside?
In total, I don't know where they all reside, but I know where some of them, I know some of them, so.
I would assume probably Harford County, right? Okay.
And just to note, A and B will likely be delegation bills. It will take them before local delegation, which just the note has dropped from, as a result of redistricting, dropped from 7 members down to 6 members on the House side.
Councilmember Boyer?
So these are the proposed pieces of legislation from our mayor. Are there any pieces of legislation that we as a council would like to see? Personally, I want to put a couple out there for you all, just for consideration.
Load 'em.
One of which is the use of video enforcement for trucks. We have a couple of streets within our town where we have posted that there are no trucks allowed to go on them. In order to be able to use video surveillance on it, we need approval from the General Assembly for that. The cost of putting in that technology would not be a cost to the city. It comes from the enforcement of it. And again, all that enforcement money goes to the state. What it does, though, is that it gives us a way of enforcing without having to have our police officers on the street all the time, making sure that when the bridge shuts down and the waves sends people to go up the street on a street where we don't have the ability to move sometimes because there's just too many pieces of vehicles on it and the residents can't get in and out. It gives us a way to enforce that, at least something. So again, the use of video enforcement for trucks on a couple of our city streets. The second thing I would like to put out there is there is currently a nuisance law for the sound of obnoxious vehicles. There are places within our city where people purposely rev up their engines to go by it, and it makes a large amount of noise. And one of the problems that our police officers have enforcing it is the enforcement mechanism is very difficult. It's based on what you think it sounded like. And our police officers, the enforcement mechanism on there is a bit of a problem. But to have some kind of piece of legislation in that makes it easier for our police officers to pull over and cite vehicles who have excessive noise. The noise generally comes from exhaust systems that are already illegal to put onto their vehicles. Putting it out there, or even adding to it a requirement during your vehicle inspection process that if you have an exhaust system that is illegal, that you can't pass the vehicle emission inspection process until you take it off. Again, it would be a nuisance to the person who has it. They probably can take it off and put it back on. But again, reinforcing that you're not supposed to have it on there in the first place. Third, I'd like to put out there another problem place that within our city that we have is the crazy intersection of Route 40, where we have multiple accidents all the time. Putting in there, advocating for the money to be put to studying for a solution for that intersection as a priority. I know it's not something that the county has prioritized historically, but I would hope moving forward it would be something that would be raised up. If we as a municipality put it out there, that it's something that's important to us, it elevates it in the funding scenario for the state. So those are three things I'd like to put out there. First, the video enforcement. Second, addressing the issue of noisy vehicles. And third, creating funding or researching a solution for our crazy intersection at Route 40. Thank you.
I agree, especially with that third one. And the easy solution is the state were to allow, Easy Pass to have the yearly pass for locals across the 95 bridge, or even not locals, people that that travel across it, to know to come down the hill.
That would be a
And they
good
always
fourth
tell
one
us,
there.
they always tell us that it's a different fund. Well, through legislation, we can fix that. So, and that's their go-to excuse all the time. They say it's a different fund, we can't do anything about it. Well, they can do something about it through legislation, and there's so many issues with people that come off the hill because they know they can pay $20 a year to go across the Hayden Bridge, and it's a couple miles out of their way, a couple minutes extra, but it saves them so much money throughout the year if they're commuting back and forth to Cecil County. And that's where a huge preponderance of our traffic, especially in the afternoons, comes from, is down the hill, right there through that intersection. And I think that should be a legislative priority that we could use to hopefully fix that intersection, or at least mitigate some of the issues.
Right, the state does have did do a study on it. They identify the long-term, really expensive solution is to create a ramp that you get onto the Hayden Bridge from 155. It's extremely expensive, and there might be a lot of environmental impacts to it, but all the other solutions that they proposed in that study are, quite frankly, insignificant, and some of them, the ones they would like to move forward with, which is expanding the apron in order to make it easier for the trucks to make the turn so they don't cause as many accidents, is the path that they'd like to go down.
Sir?
The concern on video enforcement of trucks. The legislature down in Annapolis over the last several years, I know that Senator Casserly was able to get the one for the Perryman community, but they are very much not in support of any additional red light cameras, video enforcement. So part of our issue is when we're putting these legislative priorities out there, it's got to be something where we can get a delegation support, because for us just to come out and say this and we have no support, I'd rather see our priorities be priorities that we actually know we can get the support behind, and then we have to work behind the scenes to try to make some of these changes. Even if it's a priority, I don't know that video enforcement for trucks is going to be something the legislator are currently going to get behind and want to do.
Baltimore City has recently used this as a solution and has been highly successful for them. So There is precedent within the General Assembly.
Councilmember Senegas.
My concern about the video ticketing is when trucks are rerouted from the 95 down to the 155 and into Havre de Grace, that is, that's not their fault. They make a choice to come down there, but when it's routed because of traffic, then they have no other choice but to go that direction. So they would be unfairly ticketed. So that would be my concern.
So in regards to that, I agree. Part of the problem is a social media website to help people drive. However, the law says that you are not allowed to drive on that road, and it is clearly marked. They do not notice it. They do not pay attention to it. They completely ignore it because they'd rather use that application to think for them. There are alternatives for them. They can continue down and take the right-hand turn on Estego and go up there, but they choose not to. They choose to take the shortcut because a computer program told them to do so.
I think we're getting in the weeds just a little bit. You still have more to present?
One quick question,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
Please.
You're deleting D,
Yes, sir.
and then should we change E to D? Just a simple change.
That's noted.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good catch.
So section 2 would be general favorable positions. Starting with A, legislation that would create economic incentives or stimulus for business in the city of Havre de Grace and municipalities in general. B, legislation that would establish grant funding or other funding mechanisms that would benefit the city of Havre de Grace or a nonprofit organization located within the city. C, legislation that would establish, C is, I'll just save us some time, C is the equivalent to A. D is B under section 1, and then E was covered in E. And then additionally, legislation that would benefit the Havre de Grace Star Center and legislation that would maintain or increase capital grants calculated based on highway user revenues that are required to be appropriated to municipalities, which would be the HURs. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Again, on HURs, one of the pushes that has to come into play for Annapolis is electric vehicles. Currently, electric vehicles, there is no fee or taxing authority because the highway user fees is considered a gas tax. So the use of electric vehicles on our highways does not generate any revenue. So the more and more the push is towards electric vehicles, the less highway user revenue is going to be generated because of gas-powered vehicles. So I think one of the changes we need to look at is having the General Assembly look at, they keep saying they're going to do it, but they have not, and they're not pushing it forward. They're pushing a green initiative, but they're not helping our highways with this green initiative. So what I'd like to see is again, if it's something there, that we try to get them to change the highway user revenue fee schedule and come up with a fee for the EVs. Thank you.
Would that be electric charging? Essentially, it would be taxed.
It could be electric charging taxes. It could be a mileage tax. Again, that's going to be for Annapolis to decide. I mean, for the city, it's one thing, but for the state of Maryland, which is an entirely different animal, but we have to have someone address electric vehicles and how they're going to be charged under the highway user revenue.
I just need to rewind for 1 minute. I skipped over one. Under proposed legislation would be legislation that would enable municipalities to create a police accountability board and charging committees. This is not necessarily saying the city isn't interested in creating those bodies, but would like to have the enabling legislation. All right, section 3 would be unfavorable positions, and these are general. A, legislation that is overreaching. B is legislation that diminishes a municipal government's authority for any powers granted under the Maryland Constitution or the local government article or the land use article in the annotated code of Maryland. C would be legislation that would result in 1, the removal of school resource officers from Harford County Public Schools located in the city of Havre de Grace, or 2, prevent the city of Havre de Grace from placing SROs inside Harford County Public Schools located inside city boundaries. D is legislation that would shorten the statutory deadline custodians have to process a PIA request or Maryland Public Information Act request. E is legislation that would shorten the statutory deadline the city has to pay invoices. F is legislation that would prevent or diminish the city from collecting an admission and amusement tax. G, legislation that would increase the liability of a local government per individual claims under the Local Government Tort Claims Act. Or 2, eliminate or reduce immunities for local government employees, including law enforcement officers. H, legislation limiting or preventing recreational or commercial access to the Susquehanna River, Flats, or Chesapeake Bay. And finally, I, legislation that would change the current triennial property assessment cycle.
I think, if I may add, there was an issue with Delegate Lasani, I think, was pushing it. It was 2 years ago, maybe. They wanted to change some hunting and fishing rules, and like fishing cribs and where you could hunt and where you could fish off of even the Northeast River and the Elk River. I think that as those as tributaries and having access to the water from our side to there, and this being a body as a whole, I think we should add and the tributaries thereof or something like that.
So in that year, there was 2 bills introduced. I believe one was Delegate Lasante and one was Delegate Hornberger. It dealt with the way you hunt on the flats was one of them, but the other one was during waterfowl migration season, you wouldn't be able to access the flats for recreational purposes, which would completely hinder our boat ramp revenues and just people's access to the flats.
And not only that, they, I think one of them stated that you couldn't fish during ducking season.
Yeah, it was.
Well, that's a full, 90 days of the year.
Yeah.
When duck season's in. So that happily failed. I myself, I've had issues when I was duck hunting with fishermen, but we all have to work and play together.
Yep.
And I think that was just excessive. But I would like to see more broad language in what we include in that, saying the tributaries of the Upper Bay or something, not just that. So, thank you.
Gotcha.
Any other questions on this portion, please?
So where we have the first one, legislation that is overreaching. So is there a framework for what would be defined as overreaching? Because you annotated several items that we would not support. So is there a way to make this a little bit more precise, maybe?
That's possible. I can go back and try to put some scope on there. Every once in a while, you'll see a bill which is just frankly out of control. And this call it overreaching is kind of being generous. But I can try to define that a little bit and put some scope on it.
Control out of the municipalities' hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like last year when they wanted to take all the resource officers out. To me, that was overreaching. And I think it met with a lot of resistance. So I'm just trying to think of maybe a different wording to put in there, or since you've already annotated several aspects or examples.
That's a good point. I mean, generally, it's legislation that would dictate the functions of government, essentially. I'll make sure I work on that. Yes, sir.
It really falls under the home rule process. So, I mean, when you look it up, I mean, when you're going for clarification, anything that interferes in home rule that, is not authorizing to the city is overreaching.
Yep.
So when you're looking at whether if it limits our ability, then we need to look at home rule. If it gives us the ability, if it authorizes us to have more authority, great. Authorizing legislation is good. Limiting or in violation of our home rules is what we want to oppose.
That brings us to section 4. These would be discretionary positions. A, legislation that would create an unfunded mandate for the city of Havre de Grace. B, legislation that would affect the tax property article. C, legislation pertaining to labor and employment. And D, legislation pertaining to cybersecurity. All right, Section 5. Section 5 kind of speaks to one of the points Councilmember Boyer made about Route 40. So Section 5 states under Item A, during the calendar year 2022, the mayor and city council may pass a resolution establishing a list of transportation priorities to be sent to Harford County government to be considered in the annual Harford County Transportation Priority Letter. I know that's a mouthful. So every year, Harford County government will send into the delegation a letter of their priorities. Sometimes, what we're seeking to do here is, one, we understand this corporate body's position on these matters. Two, making sure there is coordination between this body and Harford County government in this matter. And I'm also, this isn't in the resolution, but I think it would be wise if we saw a motion from the Harford County delegation that they will not accept the priority letter until they receive a resolution from each municipality, which basically spells this out as well. That's something we can work on later. But within those priorities, we do not have them spelled out right now. They'll come at a later date, working with planning and public works, but I would imagine the 40 project will be on that list. Yes, ma'am.
Would this also include the issues around Ohio Street where it seems to be getting deprioritized every year? So we would continue to
It absolutely
push
could
that?
if that was a priority established. Another thing maybe when this body comes back to look at this issue is to send in our own priority letter in addition to the county's priority letter.
And doing that, doesn't that have an impact on the equation at the state level?
I believe so. Section 6 is just elected officials and other officials to transmit this resolution to.
On this resolution, both in Section 5 and in Section 6, I think there needs to be two additions. One would be addition number 8, the President of the Maryland Municipal League Legislative Committee, and 9, the Director, or the District 10 Cecil Harford Vice President. The reason being is legislative initiatives are reviewed down there, but if we don't tell them what ours are, and it doesn't happen to be one of their priorities, we need to inform them of what our priorities are. Second, when we talk about the District 10 Vice President for Harford to Cecil County, we have a member of the State Highway Administration that is supposed to be attending these meetings. It's one of the better ways to keep inside pressure or local pressure on our State Highway Administration by having our local or the district vice president be able to address state highways. So it's just, the more people we keep in the loop, the Maryland Legislative Committee and the District 10 vice president, it would behoove us to make sure that the more people we can inform and the more people that know about our plight, the better off we will be.
That's noted, and I think we may actually put forth a little bit of an amendment here for consideration as well that limits some of this transmission in an election year, just because some of these, there's some unknown variables at this point. That's all we have for you this evening. Yes, sir. Sorry.
I'll wait for the council president to
sorry.
call me. No, I'm just kidding. So first of all, I think this is great. This is really well thought out, and you know, definitely aligns with what I would say my priorities are. So I appreciate that. I appreciate this time to go over all of this as a body. My only question would be, would it make sense to excuse me, would it make sense to perhaps start looking at the, our congressional representative for things at the federal level? One thing would be the Living Shoreline project just got held up at the federal level, right? So, prioritizing things like that. Anything to do with the waterway, like the bridge project that's coming in, or, in my mind, the sediment behind the dam would be it should be a priority for a municipality on the river. Would it make sense to start pushing things to our federal representatives as well and maybe use this same vehicle?
Absolutely.
And on the same token, on Jason's comments, there was a proposal at the federal level to start creating some federal parks on our waterways that would actually limit access to Harford and Havre residents if some of these plans go through. So I think that's one other thing that we need to keep an eye out, is the fact that the federal government is talking about creating national seashore parks, which would impact both tourism. They're saying it would increase tourism, but when they're limiting the access and our economic development as well, so it's just something we need to keep an eye on.
And one of the things we've been discussing internally too is once we have this resolution passed, is putting this into more of a booklet style, like a handout, if you will, and sending it to everyone in Annapolis, and DC as well, who represent us, just so they're aware of our positions and priorities.
Council, anything further?
I just want to say thank you, Adam, for representing us at the General Assembly level. Appreciate you being so knowledgeable and representing us.
Thank you.
Anything further, sir?
That's all I have.
Any business from the mayor?
No, great job, Council President and Council, and thank you, Ms. Ishak, Mr. Gambatoria, and Adam. Thanks a lot. Appreciate everybody's time.
So, council, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Regularly moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Meeting adjourned. Meeting adjourned.